Hello everyone, thanks for coming outside with me today. Today we're talking some adult arrows with some serious arrows, as well as some ethics archery components and the Ranch Fairy Field Point Test Kit. So first things first, I'm pretty sure everybody in the archery industry now knows who Troy Fowler, aka the Ranch Fairy, is, but if you don't, I'll put his channel down below, and I'm pretty sure also you know what ethics archery components are, as well as Sirius arrows, and if you don't though, I will also put their links down in the description below. Today we're looking at the Ranch Fairy Test Kit, which is a combination of Troy from the Ranch Fairy Sirius arrows, Sirius, as well as ethics archery components. And the entire idea behind this system is the ability to tinker and create an arrow that specifically works for you, that's a high GPI or grains per inch arrow, so a very heavy shaft, as well as heavy inserts and heavy points, and really building some high FOC, super high penetrating, very beefy arrows for whatever type of game you're pursuing. So before you start thinking about getting a test kit, you first need to understand arrow spine. And simply put, the lower the number, closer to 200 that you get, the stiffer the arrow is going to be. The higher the number, the closer to 400 you get, the weaker the arrow will be. So if you're a short draw, lighter pounded shooter, you're going to want to be closer to 400. And if you're a long draw guy like me, 30 and a half inches, and a higher, heavier pounder shooter, like 60 to 70 pounds, you're going to want closer to that 200 spine. Also, you're going to want to know the length of your arrow. For me, I like a 31-inch arrow. It puts that broadhead out in front of my hand when I'm at full draw. So the longer your arrow, probably also the stiffer in spine you're going to be. So right here, I have 250 and 300 spine. I'm not going to load this arrow up with too much FOC or front of center weight. I'm going to stick with a more moderate amount. I'm still going to use the 100 grain stainless steel insert from Ethics. It's actually a 60 to 100. You can actually cut off certain sections on the back to get it closer to a 60 grain insert. If you don't want that much FOC, let's say you're a lady and you don't want to shoot that heavy of an arrow, you can decrease that by chopping off those small bits. I'm a pretty big guy, shoot 60 pounds. I'll be able to push that 100 grain insert no problem. And then along with that arrow spine and arrow length that you want, because you're going to actually need them to cut it from the factory unless you own an arrow saw like I do, you're going to also want to know how much point weight you're going to want to mess with. In this case, you have everything from a 100 to a 200 grain setup, or you have everything from a 200 to a 300 grain field point setup. I went with the standard 100 to 200. Like I said, I don't want to build too heavy of an arrow. I like having a heavy arrow closer to 550 to 650, but I don't feel the need to build a 700 grain arrow, which is very possible with this test kit. So Sirius is going to send you 4 arrows, 2 in one spine and 2 in the other. So I have, these are the Sirius Apollo. They are 204, so they are a smaller diameter arrow. You can also get the Vulcan, which is a standard diameter arrow, in a 245. This is a two arrows that are 250 spine, and there are 2 arrows that are 300 spine. So these are the 4 that I'm going to play with. And the reason you have 4 is you can cut them to different lengths if you want to try different lengths. You can then screw one point weight into one arrow and one point weight into another. You can sit here and play around with these as much as you possibly would like. I don't have the nocks in right now, but they will ship with what looks to be Bohning X nocks in black. And then these are full-length arrows right now, so I do have to cut them to my desired 31 inches. And going back to the breakaway insert system, you can see how there are notches cut into the backside of this breakaway insert. This is a half out insert, which means that half of it is in and half of it is out of the arrow. So this is not an uncommon system. As you can see, it is in as well as outside of the arrow. Different manufacturers produce different types of inserts for a 204 diameter arrow. Easton produces their HIT insert system, which is completely hidden. I'm not a big fan of that, as it leaves as airspace between the insert and the broadhead or field point on the arrow. I much prefer the Ethics system, which is the half in, half out, and the entirety of this has an insert making contact with it the entire time. Ethics also makes systems with Ballistic Collars, which are sleeves that go over top of this insert system to further reinforce and further add FOC. It's not part of the Ranch Fairy test kit, but I figured I would mention it here. So for field points here in my left hand, we have a 100 grainer, and they go all the way up in 25 grain increments up to this big big boy, which is a 200, and like I said, they even go up to 300 if you want to go for an extreme FOC build. But each field point comes in pairs, and so that way I can stick the 100 grain into both the 250 and the 300. I can stick the 200 into both the 250 and 300 spine, shoot them, and see what kind of tears through paper or impact into a target that I get to best get my tune right. So I need to go install the nocks on these, get these arrows cut to length, get the inserts added, then I can start screwing in field points and start the tune from there. So there are two schools of thought when it comes to tuning an arrow. One, you can either have your arrow already built, the right length, the right point weight, inserts, and all that sort of stuff that you want to build, and then you can tune your bow. You can mess with the cam timing, the center shot, the levelness of the arrow, or in terms of nock height, how it sits on the string, how high or low your rest is, all that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of different intricacies when it comes to tuning your bow to an arrow. Now that's my personal method, that's what I personally like to go through, but it can be complicated. But tuning the arrow to the bow is not complicated at all. It simply involves taking an arrow and screwing on different point weights, which is what the idea of the Ranch Fairy test kit is. So I have one that's a 250 and one that's a 300, both cut to 31 inches AMO. I have the full 100 grain insert, and like I said, this is the 100 to 200 grain field point kit, and they go in 25 grain increments, but I'm gonna skip the 100 and 125 because I'm pretty sure they're gonna be okay. I want to get into the big stuff, the stuff I've never done before. So these are both 150s, 150 grains a piece. So I want to see how this 250 and 300 spine arrow shoot out of this bow. Now what I'm doing is I'm setting up a foam style target. My personal choice is the Morel high roller. In this case, it's the big high roller. You don't want to shoot a bag target when you do this type of shooting, not through paper. You can shoot through paper and get their tears left or right, up and down, and so on and so forth that way. And if you don't know a whole lot about paper tuning, I'll put a link in the description below to a video I did on paper tuning and how I get bear shafts to shoot perfectly through paper. But if I don't have that paper stand, I don't feel like messing with paper tuning, I can bear shaft tune just like this. I have a target set up about 15 yards or so. I know that I'm not going to miss the target the way my EZV sight and my rest are set up, but I want to see how that arrow is sticking into the target. If it's sticking knock to the left, if it's sticking knock to the right, if it's sticking up high, if it's sticking down low, and if it's sticking left and right, then I can add or remove point weight by simply screwing in another point, either a higher one or a lower one. I get to play around. Now, if I still do have a knock high or knock low, I'm gonna have to move my rest a little bit, but that's okay. It's a lot easier to get a vertical tear out than it is to get a horizontal one out. So let's do a couple of shots here, and I'm going to play around and see what kind of knock direction. Hopefully they fly perfectly. Full disclosure, that's the first shot I've had in about 3 weeks. Feels good to be shooting a bow. The weather's been miserable. Turkey season just started. I've been busy with the kids. Quarantine's tough. All right, so both of those are knocked to the left. Let's take the camera down and show what I'm talking about. All right, as you can see, we are facing the target directly, and you can see that both of the knocks are on the left side. The point impacted closer to the middle, and the knocks are closer to the left. The 250s on the top and the 300s on the bottom. So I know that I either need to add or reduce point weight to get that to come perfectly straight at the target. Now, whether you need to add or redact point weight, it really depends on your grip. It depends on the speed of your bow. It's often thought that the knock left is a weak arrow for a right-handed shooter and a knock right is a weak arrow for a left-handed shooter. I have seen it, however, go both ways with multiple different styles of bows, depending on how the shooter grips the bow. So I'm going to screw on the big guy. I want to screw on the 200 grainer and see what kind of tear direction we get. All right, so now we have 200 grain points, and these things are behemoths on the front end of this arrow. I really want to see how they fly out of this bow. And as a complete side note, these 204 inside diameter Apollos, they have a very smooth, the coating on them is wrapped. I will say, complete side note, they have been the easiest arrows I've ever pulled out of this Morel big high roller target. I don't shoot that number 2 side of the dice very often, and these things came out super clean. Very impressed there. All right, both those arrows shot really well, but it looks like the 250 is going to win with that 200 grain point. Let's take the camera down there and show you what I'm talking about. All right, as you can see, our bottom arrow
Over here is a 300. That's the 250 there. If I could get a little bit even lower, you can see how directly sticking into the target that 250 spine is, and the 300 moved all the way to the right, actually bumping up that extra 50 grains. But that 250, being a little bit stiffer, was able to handle that little bit higher FOC, and it came out like a dart out of that bow. Now, before I say this is the final verdict, I still want to shoot these multiple times, still shooting that 200 grain point, maybe even play with the 175, see if that 300 will tame over a little bit. But I also want to show you the importance of grip and torquing a bow when it comes to bare shaft tuning.
All right, so it looks like that 250 with 200 grains plus that 100 grain insert up front is going to win. And before I show you this torque tuning thing, you don't have to do a 200 grain broadhead, for example, on 100 grains of insert. You can play around with any different type of ethics component that you want. If you already have a whole bunch of 100 grain heads laying around, ethics can make you a 200 grain insert, as crazy as that sounds, or a 175 and a 125, 150, 150, whatever you have already in terms of broadheads in particular, because they're the expensive part on the front end of the arrow. Whatever you have already, you can have ethics components build you arrows, build you components rather, that would suit your arrows and be able to use those 100 grain or 125, 150, whatever you're already using. Now, back to what I was talking with the torque issue. So that 250 flew like a dart out of my bow, but when it comes to bare shaft tuning, the importance of your grip and how you're holding the bow is super important and super critical. And if any torque either side that is not consistent, you're not going to get consistent bare shaft flight. So what I'm going to do now, my usual grip when it comes to the bow is I have my hand and I usually, make a fist, rotate, and then open. So it sits at about, I don't know, 2 o'clock on the clock face. And so then I put in between right here at the bottom part of the meaty part of my thumb pad right into the grip itself. And that allows me to have almost no torque on the bow. I can open my hand and I can do all sorts of things, and the bow does not want to torque or twist to the left or to the right. Now I'm going to shoot both these arrows, and with one I'm going to torque severely. I'm going to pull in with my hand. I'm going to push on the left side of the grip, torquing the bow to the right. The other shot I'm going to torque with to the inside. I'm going to put a lot of pressure on the inside of the grip, my thumb side of the grip, and I'm going to torque the bow to the left. And I want to show you how drastic just a little bit of torque can be when it comes to a bare shaft shot, even at such a short distance of 15 yards. So with this shot, I'm going to put a lot of thumb pressure. I'm going to torque the bow to the left. My sight is going to go tracking to the left. Now I'm going to go torque the opposite direction, where I'm going to put a lot of ring finger pressure, or the outside here, and I'm going to torque the bow to the right. My sight's going to want to go to the right. And that is exactly what I want to see. Let's go down and see what these two horribly torqued arrows look like when they're actually sticking into a target.
So you might be thinking, what the heck happened? That 250 spine with a 200 grain point shot a perfect dart. What happened here? This huge knock left, huge knock right. All about the torquing. The upper arrow here was me pushing thumb side pressure. The bottom arrow here was me pushing with ring finger pressure. And look how bad that torque is. Look how terrible that tune is. This one is not atrocious. It looks like it could behave, but we just saw it just a few moments ago shooting a perfect dart with no torque whatsoever imparted onto the grip and onto the riser. This is super important that you remember this when you are going to bare shaft tune. Not just with the range fairy test kit, but with any type of tuning. You need to watch your torque on the riser. Your grip is the most pivotal and important part of the bow. Don't screw it up. Leave it nice and relaxed. Don't put undue pressure. Make it even pressure, and you'll get those perfect darts flying down range, and you'll be able to avoid these catastrophes.
So that's the way to work with the Ranch Fairy test kit from Sirius and Ethics. Find the arrow that you like, either the 204 diameter with the Apollo or the Vulcan, which is a 245 standard diameter. Very heavy GPIs in both those arrows. Pick which one you think is going to work for you. If you want to change your inserts, you can. I left them the full 100 grain so I could add a little bit extra weight, and then pick either 100 to 200 grain point or 200 to 300. And now looking after shooting the 200, I kind of wish I'd gone with the 200 to 300 to get that extreme FOC, but this arrow is already so heavy as it is. I don't think I need to add a 300 grain point up front, but it still would have been fun to try. If you have any questions, however, about the Sirius arrows or the Ethics components or the whole Ranch Fairy test kit in general, follow me in the description below below. You can hit me up on Facebook and Instagram. Leave a comment here on YouTube. My email's even down in the description if you want that more personal touch. Hope you're able to get outside, enjoy the sport of archery hunting if you so choose. Definitely enjoy God's beautiful creation, and we'll get to see you next time.